Alright, so today's agenda, I want to touch base on jump forward. We're going to talk about private lessons, volunteer coaches. Hope you guys had a chance to look over the initial proposed legislation. We'll talk through, get your votes, and so we can complete our coaches grid. I'll talk about some adopted legislation that came into effect this year from last convention cycle that are applicable to the recruiting, and then we'll do a little bit of kind of the coaches compliance test review. Okay. I know majority, but I believe we've got a few other coaches who haven't completed. To show of hands if you have not met or did a workshop with Jump Forward. Okay.
You have not?
All right, so you need to make sure you go back and you look for the email and schedule an appointment so that way you guys can all get on board with that, okay? So we can complete kind of that task of you guys getting familiar with the system. The next piece, I know I've got a lot of questions of when will we have forms in there, when will Kara go in there. First and foremost, let's get everybody trained. Second, you can begin logging your prospects. So if you are recruiting, whether it be your 18, 19, 20, you can begin using the system to essentially for recruiting purposes on your end, okay? Probably in October, once I've had a chance to kind of close out some waivers we're working on, we'll get with Jesse and Sam and Sarah, and we'll identify what forms we'll roll out first and give you guys instructions on that, okay?
Does Lauren have it? She should.
She should. I think she was on the
We
list.
submitted the email with everybody, all GAs, so shoot me an email,
Okay.
and I'm pretty sure she's on that list. She should have gotten an email.
Okay, she maybe in her junk folder. She didn't see it. Okay.
Oh, but if we need to send it out again. All right, so I want to talk about volunteer coaches. For the fact simply, we've got 3. We've not had any previously, and I should say any, we've had 1. But now we're looking where we've got volunteer coaches across multiple sports. And so just wanted to make sure that, one, you knew what was in the compliance policy and procedure manual. Make sure you guys refer to that. So even for, we're talking about volunteer coaches, you got student managers, just refer to that as some guidelines on what needs to be completed in the process. All right, so volunteer coaches are responsible for upholding the expectations of the NCAA, as are all other coaches. So the same responsibility you have, they have. If they commit a violation, it's like your program committing a violation, okay? As volunteer coaches are, I guess, appointed or assume the responsibilities, you need to make sure that they come and meet with me, okay? Why so? Just need to make sure that, one, I can get some email. If they can't attend compliance ed, I'd like to be able to send them PowerPoint so that they are also getting some education. I've tried to start doing kind of Interp Thursday or giving you guys something either from the GSC or the NCAA on Thursdays. I want to include them in that education piece as well. Just another source so that way I can make sure I'm getting some communication directly to them as a part of your staff. Okay. The other piece is just make sure they review. So part of being a staff member, and you guys have noticed, is that all of our coaches, all of our staff are required to take the NCAA compliance certification test. Again, it just helps them have a more overall awareness of the rules and regulations just than, hey, come be my volunteer coach, and being absent of kind of the responsibility that that title actually holds. Okay. Volunteer coaches are responsible. So background check. I believe I know I've gotten one from baseball, and Chris already had his on file, and then I just received Melissa. So those have gone over. They're listed on your staff designation. The key to that too is at any point when a volunteer coach comes on, or even student assistant manager comes on, you know, that staff designation is updated, as well as when those individuals are coming off. And so if at some point you decide this isn't working out, they're removed, make sure you alert us so that way we can have it updated in our multiple databases. Okay. NCAA recruiting exam we talked about. The other piece is the certificate of compliance for staff members. And so example, Chris was affiliated with the program last year. He signed that this year. So it'll be important for volleyballs and then also for baseball for your volunteer coaches. If they are going to return next year, to also sign that. Otherwise, would designate them as no longer employed. Okay. Also, a Montgomery, all members at Montgomery confidentiality acknowledgement form. Again, working with student athletes, right? We go through our FERPA training, making sure, I think it also protects you and your program, that what is happening amongst your teams is another source of, it needs to stay within the team. You don't need volunteer coaches going out in the community, talking about your teams, but also protecting their information from date of birth and social security or S numbers and the things that are not permitted as FERPA. It just helps in making sure that that's a part of that. Okay. And then again, the manual. So I'll make sure that these coaches get an electronic manual similar to what I sent you all out earlier this fall. Okay. Why? Okay, so I got a couple secondaries that I just wanted to share why, that volunteer coaches are held to the same responsibility as you as head and assistant coaches or graduate assistant coaches. Okay. Here in March 2014, the head women's volleyball coach, head coach, invited a volunteer coach who had taken but not passed the compliance exam to an off-campus meal with a prospective student athlete during an official visit. Specifically, on March 22nd, the volunteer coach was asked by the head coach to go with the PSA host and the assistant coach to dinner. The volunteer coach does no recruiting on or off campus. She has graduated from our program in 2013 and had just come back to help for practice and games in 2013-14. She's completing a second degree in nursing and will graduate after the 2014, fall 2014. Head coach had no intention of ever having a volunteer coach recruit, nor did she want to recruit. Head coach was actually just trying to be nice and asked her to dinner. Violation was discovered by compliance the following day while reviewing documentation from the visit. So I think there's, it could be easily, again, great that we are requiring all of our staff to take a coach's certification exam. Whether you anticipate those coaches actually recruiting off campus, but it protects you on campus. This was very innocent. Join us for dinner, right? Join us for dinner, just come on over. But because they went off campus, even though that prospect was on an official visit, it was recruiting off campus. Okay, and so that was impermissible. Example 2, here in November 2013, volunteer baseball coach attended a prospective student athlete signing of the institutional letter of intent. In addition, volunteer coach had not passed the off-campus recruiting certification, specifically PSA, who attended church and is a family friend of volunteer coach. Asked him to attend signing of the institutional letter of intent. PSA is not receiving athletic aid and is a walk-on. Volunteer coach did not attend rules education during 2012-13 and is a full-time resident director of camp. Upon sharing this information with the head baseball coach, the volunteer coach self-reported the violation to compliance on November 25th. Okay, so I think a couple things that we can gather from that rules education. So why, it's important for me also to share what we're learning on our second Tuesdays of every month with those volunteer coaches. And I think it'll be very important for you guys who have volunteer coaches and graduate assistants and student managers just to have some conversation about the things you're learning. So that way we continue to educate them. But the other piece too is, again, recruiting off campus. We know when students are signing National Letter 10 or Grant and Aid, can you guys be present? Can you be present?
No.
Okay, yay, woo!
Does the fact that it's a mutual, prior relationship not supersede that?
In this case, it seemed like it doesn't.
I mean, if I am going to church with somebody for 15 years, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I guess that's, and I did say 15 years, but that's my question.
Right. I would say just the nature of you being a coach and your employment supersedes, in this case, it seems like the relationship because it's the national signing intent. Could it be something else that wasn't considered and that you can be involved in, possibly? But based on this violation that was in there, but it seemed like that was a no-no, as well as being that it's a signing day, regardless of the fact that you had that previous relationship. But that's a great question.
Always err on the side of caution, my advice.
All right, so, working with Eric and his staff this past week, I drafted up an intern for volunteer coaches. I'll be sure to share that with the staff this afternoon when I send out these notes. It simply just lists some permissible and impermissible guidelines with recruiting activity as well as compensation and benefits. Okay, so just make sure you look for that this afternoon. All right. The other piece with recruiting, a lot of times with you guys as coaches, you are doing camps more than private lessons. And so in getting a recent question and going back and looking at the legislation, identified, hey, there's some things that we just need to clarify as a department ourselves, okay, with private lessons. Our current policy and procedure says that the teaching of lessons by members of the Auburn University at Montgomery coaching staff will fall under the camp's policy and procedure. Only an institution's equestrian, golf, or tennis coach may teach private lessons to prospective student athletes, provided NCAA conditions are met. The gross rental charge of 55% will be deposited monthly from the lessons to the coaches on the coach's personal log. The teaching of lessons conducted during university hours is prohibited. So why does this fall under Kingston Clinic's policy? And I gave you some hints. It was a new policy that was rolled out last year. I think is a big thing when you're talking about prospects on campus.
Line of sight policy.
Line of sight policy, yes. All right.
Good job, Ryan.
I'm good at Will for
Here's your candy, yes. Good job, Ryan. Yay. All right, the other piece here, when you're using university facilities, saying like camps, what do you do to for that space? Same you would probably use if you were renting something elsewhere to conduct a lesson. Anyone?
What is
Rental
rental
fee?
fee?
What is rental fee? Yay! Woo-hoo!
Can't think so.
No, I don't. Sorry. I'll think of you next time. All right. And then as we have learned with the NCAA legislation, what is kind of the typical thing that is required before doing anything? Paperwork. But what does paperwork provide? I'll give you kudos for that, though. It is paperwork.
When in doubt.
When in doubt. When in doubt.
Big sneakers.
When in doubt, what are you essentially seeking from the Department of Athletics or
Prior.
Policy approval.
Did you say? Prior approval. Prior approval. Yay. Once again, prior.
No, it threw me off. I thought that was all one word there.
Sorry, I didn't space it enough.
That's okay.
I didn't space it enough.
No, I was actually trying to think.
All right, so the NCAA legislation again states that your equestrian, your golf, and your tennis coach may provide private lessons to prospective student athletes. Okay, so what does that mean for AUM athletics?
Tennis.
Our tennis coach, you want papers?
Our tennis coach can provide private lessons to prospects. What does that mean for the rest of you guys?
We can't, you gotta be under 9th grade.
You can't provide to prospects, but you can provide it to non-prospective age students. Okay?
That's
So
on and off campus.
that's on and off campus. Correct. So, there is a law. So if you guys are thinking of providing lessons, you've got to check in. Again, when we talk about prior approval. So we've reread the legislation and we've said, hey, what are we missing? Whether the tennis coach is teaching private lessons to a prospect or any other sport is teaching it to a non-prospect student athlete, we're going to follow the same guidelines. That just protects us as a whole for our institution. So what you see there, A, the coach makes the lessons available to everybody has a sheet. General public. Thank you, Scotty. All right. The prospect must reside within 100-mile radius of the institution's campus. Fees charged to the prospective prospect or non-prospect at the what? Standard rate, going rate. And then, so Somebody read B.
Prior written approval is received annually from the institution's chief executive officer,
Who's that?
Dr. Stockton.
Correct, thank you. E. Fees of the youth are not paid by individual entities other than the respective parent or legal guardians. Okay? And then F, the institution keeps on file in the Office of the Director of Athletics documentation of the fees charged for private lessons and the name of any individual receiving any portion of the fee. Okay? So if you are considering teaching private lessons, before you do this each year, you will need to request approval. Okay? So this will be done on an annual basis, similar with some of the other personnel paperwork that we have. Okay? Yes.
We may have, I mean, it may not apply to everybody, so we can talk about this separately, but like, some adults, they're riding the train. They don't have kids, they're not older than I am, in their 40s, 50s.
Yeah. I would say log it,
Okay.
because at the end of the day, you're going to have to also log it when you turn in your outside athletic related activities if they're paying you for it. Okay, so I'd say log it.
And if they're not paying, still.
I'd say still log it. Yeah. Because in some way you may think, okay, I may now become boosted through our program because you're involved in the workout, so it's just, it has some applications. Recruit them to be a booster. That's a program. Okay. Any questions? I have a question. Yes,
I
ma'am.
got a question to something. The teaching of lessons conducted by university during university hours is prohibited. That's from our policy procedure.
That is from our,
So she doesn't come out unless approved, unless otherwise approved by the director of athletics.
all right.
There are some circumstances, you know, I know Rolando used to come in at 7 and he probably would give lessons until 9 a.m. in the morning. So theoretically, that's university business hours. I don't want us to not give our people the opportunity to do so. In some cases, not all cases, but that need to be a consistent thing. But at least when certain things are happening, if there's something during the day, that at least gives us a little bit of wiggle room.
Okay, I'll make that change to compliance meeting. That's what we just went over. All right, so we talked about new form. All right, so here's an example for you guys, just as secondary. During March and April 2016, the assistant field hockey coach provided private lessons to 2 prospective student athletes. Specifically, assistant coach provided 1-hour private lessons to 2 PSAs at $50 an hour. Assistant coach provided PSA number 1 with 6 lessons and 2 lessons to PSA number 2. The violation was occurred on March 25th, 6th, 7th, 31st, 1st, etc. Self-reported the violation and immediately discontinued all lessons. Either PSA has committed to the institution. All right. So I think a lot of times confusion is it my prospect or is it just someone who's prospect age? And so it just falls under prospect age. That's the key there. All right. So new provincial legislation. Did you guys? I'm sorry. Yes.
So, did we get any clarification on not private lessons, but working somewhere?
Yeah. So if it
Or
is
skill instruction is taught?
so if it is a club,
Correct.
you play puppy, that's fine. But if
Okay.
it's a private lesson, it's for everyone. So it applies to everyone. So the legislation, the private lessons, prospect age applies to all prospects. But if you are working with a club, you're an employee of the club,
Yeah.
then you, as long as you are providing lessons a part of that club,
Correct.
you're clear.
It's not private.
Right. When you leave that club and you're not doing your thing, even though you're an employee and now you say, hey, come and work here, it's a violation. But if you're with that club, then you're good.
You just said something. Strike zone. So strike zone is a business,
And you can be employed.
and you can be employed by them. That's not considered a private lesson by virtue of you being an employee with that business.
Correct.
But but you're still providing skill instruction.
But you're part of that club.
Correct, you're not, it's not, huh?
No.
No, they still have to be age.
Well, I'm sorry, the academy can be an age. It's when
Yeah.
you take them and say, hey, that was
It's if
great.
you were to say.
Well, let's go private lessons
Strike
then.
zone, yeah, right?
Not yet.
Not yet, but you're about to.
Maybe.
So yeah, if you do, let's just say hypothetically you're employed with Strike Zone, you're giving lessons, Strike Zone is paying you to give skill instruction. But if for some reason,
I bring them here.
yeah, there's a side,
Yeah.
then that's, as
As
long
long
as
as
you're.
those doors.
Yep,
Okay.
And I've got some more information to send out, and I had some good questions from Chris the other day that I'll be sure to. There's some other things that I was looking at under private lessons and clubs to give you guys a better explanation. So I'll make sure, I'll draft that in Turk and send out some additional kind of examples of what not to do and what to do.
yeah. Hey, and really quickly guys, I'm about to have the heads-in meeting for my team shop with Brandon so that we can go ahead and get that off the ground. But as far as volunteer coaches are concerned, from my perspective, I think in the past it was highly discouraged. I don't want to discourage it, but I don't necessarily want to encourage it because you have now made the decision that you are in charge, being the head coach, of what happens with that volunteer coach. So unless you can really have a good relationship with that person, Sam is an exception because he's here virtually every day. You know what I'm saying? So he's a volunteer coach. I think sometimes it can get very gray if we start letting a lot of coaches, volunteer coaches on our staff because we don't have that kind of, stronghold on what they do on a daily basis. You know, Chris, he's been doing it with us for a couple years now, but if you're considering adding a volunteer coach to your staff, have that conversation with me before you submit the staff designation form. You know, I think a lot of times too with volunteer coaches, less of your coaching staff is honestly more, because sometimes they tend to be more of a pain and upkeep than what it's really worth. If they're not able to provide you anything but once in every blue moon, some assistance. The other part of it is, depending on what they're doing, if they're going to be traveling with you, that's an additional expense as well, so something that I think needs to be considered. So, like I said, I don't want to say I discourage it, but I think we need to definitely be smart about it because we become accountable for those people's actions.
All right, so 2018 convention legislation, at our staff meeting, providing you all a copy. Has everyone had a chance to review, read? Yay? Nay? 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 So I guess the great thing is instead of I think 17 we had last year, there's only 3. The first one deals with NCAA membership eligibility for membership to international institutions. Simply, it's allowing institutions who reside not only in Canada but also in Mexico to apply for membership. And so they would go through that. The purpose of that was to essentially grow the Division II. So just kind of. Anybody support it?
I don't.
Okay. Any other opposers?
Yeah, this is what we went over the, see,
That's on them.
I just don't think that the Mexican government and the situation in Mexico is stable enough for us to have a relationship with them.
Hey, you get them cartels involved, that's gonna be some good teams. That'd be fun in there.
We do
Mexico.
not have to play them.
I'm gonna sign up, I'm gonna sign up and work for the cartels.
Why would we not have to plan?
School in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, but the Puerto Rican schools.
In the regular season, we wouldn't have to.
Well, I mean, postseason we would.
Yeah, postseason there'd be potential, but, I mean,
Soccer thing.
traditionally, you guys will see that those, like Puerto Rico has a Division II institution, I think you guys,
That's an American territory.
they're funding, but my argument is they're funding because of where they are logistically. It is very difficult for them to be able to come up with really competitive programs. You have to travel all over the freaking, all over creation, you know, in order to, I mean, their operating costs in themselves.
Right.
It's outrageous. Yeah. And then you have to recruit people to try and come to, you know, it's just, it's really difficult.
Could be some good guarantees.
Wolf abstains, Eric opposes, Chris. Dan, Scotty.
What's that? On which one?
We're on the first one here.
Thanks,
No opinion, Ryan?
Mexico,
I
Canada.
don't really have an opinion.
Okay, Dan?
I'm with Eric, keep them out.
Just kidding.
I'm building a wall. I'm not building a wall. You know, hotels are the cheap,
Lauren,
man.
abstain?
What did he say? Today,
Okay,
taking the fit.
okay. Good baseball, huh?
Get over the door for real.
Yeah.
We have an influx of humans on our team.
All right. The next piece here, recruiting, publicity, comments prior to signing, actions of social media platform, okay? So the intent of this one is to establish exception to the restriction on publicity for commitments that permit actions like liking, favorite, or republishing by institution staff member on social media platforms that indicate approval of content on social media platforms that were generated by users of the platform, other than institutional staff members. All right, so the exception that they are listing, let me see if I'm here. The exception they're listing here, actions that indicate approval of content on social media. An athletic department staff member may now take actions like liking, favorite, republishing on social media platforms that indicates approval of content. So it's not saying having a conversation, it's simply like, hit as your favorite with the little hearts, republish it, all right, but not, hey Danny, I think this is great, all right, and that's conversation point. Simple, like, you know, all the cute little buttons that exist on social media. So this was a part of the original package for legislation, but it actually got approved already. So this was approved August 30th. So if you look on LSDBI, you'll see that it's actually in the legislation. It's not something we'll vote on, but a conversation piece for us to talk about that you can now do that prior to signing. So you got prospects who are on your social media, you can like, you can favorite, put a heart around it, let them know you're interested in that.
But you can't
Do not comment, do not have conversations, do not get private messages. And tell you like I tell your student athletes, at the end of the day, it's gonna come out.
Can I send a wink? She said we couldn't wink, I'm just kidding around.
I think that's probably, going back to Leslie.
How about, yeah, that's all I was kidding.
Let's keep it PG, okay?
Yeah.
Alright.
I'll let you read with this.
Social media, website.
Just curious though, in having to be restricted with your legislation, right, beforehand you weren't allowed to do those things. Have this gone through the floor, as coaches, what have been your opinion? Would you say, hey, we would support them changing it and allowing us to now favorite and like, or would you prefer not to favorite and like?
I would have gone not to.
Not to? I'm just curious, I want to know.
Why? I mean, honestly, I probably
I
would have.
say you either do all of it or you don't do anything.
Right, that's why I say not to. Some coaches do it. You see it, it's hilarious. You'll see the Division I coaches or assistants, oh, they like this person. I mean, I know it's a new wave. I just think it's, I don't know, I just think it's stupid, to be honest with you.
What do you think, Scotty?
That's fine.
I don't really care. I mean, if the coach wants to like the picture, let them like the picture, you know? I don't like that.
Okay. So, abstain?
Yeah.
Okay. Brian?
I mean,
You support it?
I support it because it lets that kid know that I'm paying attention, but I don't have to call him every week and say, how are you doing? How'd your race go today? Oh, okay, great. But at least they can see see that I'm paying attention to what they're doing, and I can call on a less frequent basis.
But you just said blow up social media.
Huh?
Didn't you just say you want to blow up social media?
I didn't say that.
Just say media.
I don't
Well,
like
it's your
social
day.
media.
Yeah, so you don't like social media.
Don't matter.
Yeah, but then
I abstain. Part of our work, I like abstaining.
Thank you. Chris, what's your thoughts?
Well, if you're such a unusual person, or
Chris is good
I
at
The thoughts,
I heart this one.
Winky face.
Randy?
I was gonna say,
Strong.
recruit more American kids.
Martin, what's your thoughts? Like it.
Once I learn how to get all of
Don't worry,
That's not what you say, Sam,
I'm new as
Legs are
well.
all bruised up here from
on the
I will share this with you. Something that we talked about at the GSC meetings through their Connect One initiative is that talk about how this generation is so connected to likes and favorites more than any other recruiting classes you've ever had to go through. And so
Pathetic.
It is.
We're enabling poor behavior.
they
Exactly.
rely on that feedback. And so, you know, I mean, to
But I think it's more prevalent over here in the USA than it is overseas.
you think,
I don't even know.
It's kind of like, you know, we'd almost wish if you could, like when you're getting on a kid, that there's some way you could either like them or dislike them instead of yelling at them like, hey, I don't like this behavior, run hard.
Should make sense.
it impacts them,
There
it impacts
you
them.
go, sign.
It impacts them.
Do the wink when you do good.
No winking. No winking.
When you wink.
All right, the third piece here, practice and playing season, women's volleyball. First day of competition, it changes that. Volleyball's not here, so. Their first day, so right now, they are required to begin their segment the Thursday preceding September 6th, when they have the National Fall Festival. In those years, they're allowing them to start proceeding August 31st, okay? Before the Thursday preceding August 30th, I'm sorry, I said 31st, August 31st. All right, so it gives them essentially one more week of season, but then also prevents them from jamming up their semester with that. So I don't know if that impacts, are you guys jealous that you get to start? Wolf, you guys, Ryan, are you jealous that volleyball will get a extra?
Absolutely not. I don't even like preseason.
You what?
I don't like preseason. I would start the last fall.
Yeah, I might as well.
My only concern with this one, as a former volleyball coach, would be if my institution, AUM, is going to do everything in their power to allow me to get off the gate like all my competitors. So if, you know, if we're moving the date, that's cool, because all my competitors are, at AUM, are we going to be able to really kick off when everybody else is going to
Like
be?
preseason, being able to come in early.
Right.
You know, it's just more headache killers. The less preseason, the better. Nobody gets far less than
So let's take a vote for Mel and share.
I like
7
Eric's.
years.
I like Eric's thought. And I think that's why.
You know what? Our preseason is really not preseason anyways.
Wait a minute, you're in charge of SAC now, so calm down.
To me, that's not a preseason, it's a glorified, bringing them in 3 days early or 4 days early, go through the meetings, and then school starts. If I wanted a good preseason, you gotta go back to the NAI where we can run the shit out of them for 3 weeks.
We would leave.
Whoa. Use that as an emergency.
I'm not using anything as a damn.
You could.
All right,
So I think we should cut preseason and start when school starts. That's what I'm thinking. But it's gotta be across the board for, at all D2 schools.
you want to write some new legislation?
No, shit, no.
He's a SAC.
I mean, you wouldn't have to write it.
So that's not been proposed yet?
This is for volleyball.
Oh.
So the kind of opening the window so their season isn't as impacted.
So somebody
friendly. Yeah, so this.
Soccer's
school
gonna
that wrote
change
this-
anyways down the road, with, they're trying to move soccer to a fall and spring.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
They do it in Europe, so you just play one game a week on the weekends. Limited practice times, 3 times a week, don't miss any class times,
Yeah,
and all that kind of stuff.
I'm for that.
Because and then you start the season up from 18 to 22 games, so you play 11 games in the fall and 11 games in the spring. That's the big push for soccer. I know it's on the Division 1 level right now, they're talking about that.
But it'll trickle down,
When was it?
especially the cash.
Would be in May or June. Go home and turkey.
So they like, first half of the season?
You can bring new recruits in.
You probably have to be, like basketball, you have to be declared eligible.
Yeah.
Fall.
That's pretty cool.
I like it.
What'd you say for declared eligible?
Like basketball, you can't bring in
Mid-year,
any item you could.
Yeah, we would have a later start date too. We wouldn't have
Some
to
teams
move up
do really good at that.
early
Like, used to do that.
More of a.
Chatting with all the.
That's exactly what they're aiming to, because
What about
they'll
the,
combine the development of soccer.
what about like these Maine and North Dakota and all those states where there's going to be a polar ice cap in January, February, turf?
All right, so let's talk about some of the adopted legislation for this year. 2 things that would pertain to recruiting, requirement to obtain permission to contact from NAIA institutions, and then institutional pre-enrollment fees. So we'll start there. Essentially with the requirement to obtain permission to contact NAIA, they added the language, permission to contact is not required for a student athlete at a NAIA institution. However, the D2 institution director of athletics or designee must send notification of recruitment. So essentially, NCAA has adopted NAIA rule when it pertains to NAIA schools. So if you're recruiting an NAIA student, typically, what we're doing is sending out our transfer tourister that asks the question, do we have permission to contact? Now notify us and we'll send out a notice that says the institution has made contact to that student. Okay.
But we can't contact an NAIA kid.
Without sending notice. You can, but we need to send notification that we are.
So basically,
Establishing
they're dissing the
contact.
AI even more. Oh my-
So for example,
I want to recruit an NAIA kid.
The kid have to be prior to a degree.
If you will, yeah. Yep. Okay. The other piece, institutional pre-enrollment fees. Before I read this, I know we always talk about funds and money. I'd be curious, since this is new legislation, as you guys are talking to your colleagues around the campus and then around the nation, just to see what schools are doing differently. Because some schools have the resources to do it, some don't. But I wonder, and what we probably need to keep an eye on is, does this at all become a recruiting disadvantage? Since this is something that we currently do not do. So what it says here is institutional pre-enrollment fees. An institution may waive, pay in advance, or guarantee payment of any institutional pre-enrollment fee for a prospective student athlete who has signed a national letter of intent or the institution's written offer of admission or financial aid for whom the institution has received a financial deposit in response to its offer of admissions. Mouthful. The pre-enrollment fees is one that is required by the institution for enrollment. It includes the following. The institution's processing fee required prior to the admissions office evaluation of prospective student athlete application. We don't have application fee. The orientation, counseling, test fees required for all incoming students. So for us, that would be if they've got to take a placement test, right? Pre-enrollment placement test to their classes. Pre-admission academic testing fee. Advanced tuition payment for prospective student athlete guarantee. Our room deposits. So one of our pieces for especially our walk-ons is have they pay that room deposit so that way we can release them, right? They're saying, hey, you can Okay, how does that impact that? Well, then they don't have anything at the institution that we're paying it. Damage deposit for dormitory rooms, which is weird that that's on there, it's a pre-enrollment fee. ROTC deposit for military equipment. I know we've got one student in ROTC, so she needed equipment, it's saying that we could essentially pay for the deposit of that. Immunizations, so I know a lot of time with our international students, just being immunized to US, something that can be paid for. And then any other pre-enrollment fees required for prospective student athletes. So to me, that may fall in as orientation, that's a pre-enrollment fee. Anything else you think your students go through? They got to take placement tests, ACT residual on campus as a pre-enrollment fee maybe. I mean, I don't know what other schools have.
Higher fees won't count with that.
Hybrid, that's our, no, I mean, that's a part of your tuition fees, additional pieces that you can only play, okay? So, like I said, kind of just be aware that that's some things that was adopted last convention cycle for, it was actually immediate, so it's been in there for about 6 months or 8 months here. Just be
So you
mindful.
can now
The institution-
waive those.
That's what the legislation. Doesn't mean that AUM says that you can, I'm just saying,
Oh, no.
pay attention and see what your colleagues are doing, and if it becomes a recruiting disadvantage, then maybe it's a conversation that we have.
Is it they can be
Mike.
waived or they can be
Have
paid
you
for?
talked about this, haven't you, a little bit, maybe, or?
Pre-enrollment fees may be waived or paid in advance, or guaranteed fees.
Housing, does anybody know people who do that? Their schools?
That's what I'm saying, pay attention as you know,
They
I would
do.
say,
I mean,
you know.
The room deposit,
The room
especially for
deposits.
international athletes,
Yeah.
room deposit, immunization, and orientation fees are either waived or paid for international student athletes. And I can list at least 5 schools off the top of my head that do it.
well, if you, and like I said, if you guys think this is a hindrance to recruiting, I think maybe something coaches committee can do is, get a list of things that you guys feel like are impacting the program, present it from that perspective.
I want to ask a question about a change coming in next year at the end.
Okay.
Just don't want to forget.
Okay. All right, so what I wanted to do, one of the questions, what time is it, guys? We got 15 minutes here.
Turning it off.